This-
Oh!
Editor, distorter. All right. Okay. So before we start properly, we're gonna have a little test run so we all know what to expect here. The day of all the blood. We all know and love it. All right. Without further ado.
This is the story of a day where there was all this blood. A man was walking around and blood started coming out of him everywhere. There was so much blood that IT filled up an elevator to the store and there was just blood all over the place. People were slipping in IT and they were all grossed out. He tried to go swimming and all of the sharks went nuts and bitten everybody. He got chased by all the vampires ever. One time the blood got a kid and a dog. At the end of the day everyone decided they would send him to space so that he would stop getting blood everywhere. The scariest part is that the man was you. Or he was a lady if you are a lady and you forgot that this happened.
All right.
Gender inclusive.
So that was the day of all the blood, and now I am going to. Where is it? Where is it? Where's my story? Okay, there we go. We're now going to play.
No, we forgot all the creepypastas.
Oh, the creepypasta keep coming out of my pockets. We're now going to play the fucked up version that we have translated.
Today of all blood, or hard times will come back. Human blood never stops. There was a lot of blood in the elevator. Go to the supermarket, there is blood everywhere. People were screaming and everyone left. They tried to swim so that all the fish have eggs and bite everything. All vampires hunt. The boy is an ugly dog.
It's like that, okay. Now that we all know what is going on, I will now play an actual story.
That wasn't a story?
No, that was real.
Super Mario 64, or Spelen see Super Mario 64 kostenlos online. When I was a kid, I really liked Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
I remember my uncle's house playing it all the time. Well, one day, while I was watching a game video on YouTube, a pop-up appeared. I was surprised and was about to close the window until I realized it was a site showing a new version of Super Mario 64. There were pictures and everything.
65.
I usually don't trust these things, but the urge came to me and I wanted to buy it. This whole deal is unique because the game owner wants the buyer to send a $10 envelope to the site and address instead of using something like PayPal. What's even weirder is that when I have a problem with the game and then I try to go to the website, I type in the URL, I can't find it anywhere. A few days after I sent the $10, I received a package with a new copy of the game. The first thing I noticed when I opened the little box was that Mario's flying official sticker had been conspicuously removed. Instead, there was a strip crudely written with Mario in permanent marker. It felt a little ripped, but I don't mind as long as the game works. I took out the Nintendo 64 and inserted the cartridge. The screen opens with Mario's familiar face, which you can stretch and rotate aimlessly. I remember laughing at the results when I was younger and thinking I was wasting my time. I moved the cursor to Mario's ear and flicked it to the point. I'll do the same thing in my other ear when the TV suddenly creates a lot of static. Everything about Mario's head started to bend and twist in ways I didn't know were possible in the model. Sad game starts playing with static. While all this was happening, I heard a soft voice whispering in Japanese. His voice was low and low. I immediately closed the game and tried again. This time Mario did not bother me. Just select a new file and start playing. When I downloaded the file, the game skipped the opening monologue on the beach and outside the playground. Mario was placed inside a castle. Bowser kept his head down and said nothing. I tried to ignore it and kept playing. Also, I didn't notice the music. Only the silence of death. Don't talk frogs around. The only door I can get through is the pop-up fight. The other door also did not respond to button commands. Pop-Ump's picture of the battlefield is no ordinary picture. It's just a blank canvas. I'm still trying to convince myself that these are minor flaws and won't affect the game. As soon as I entered the picture, the painting suddenly changed from a blank canvas to a dead lava landscape. You know that slightly confusing image of a flame with an evil grin? Yes, I was skeptical at the time. The mission selection menu appeared and there were some surprising details. Instead of Big Bob-omb on the summit, this mission was called Turnback. I don't know why I pressed A, but I did. The condition seems normal. I remember everything. I think I can finally enjoy my favorite game from my childhood. But I saw him. Luigi really surprised me. He is not in this game. The model does not replace Mario's plate. It looks like a completely original model. Luigi stood still until I tried to reach him. He started running at an unexpected speed. I follow him across the plain. A strange thing happened while chasing me. Every time I collect coins, the enemies and the music decrease and the landscape seems darker and more threatening. It kept getting worse until I collected the 5th coin and then the music stopped. The enemy is dead on the ground. I was very scared, but I kept chasing Luigi. I ran uphill and the cannonball that tried to overtake me didn't work. I was not very surprised by this place. Luigi was always out of my sight when I was running. When I went upstairs, I noticed that something was still missing. On the mountain I saw a small hut. Luigi was nowhere to be found. Cottage was definitely not a good Mario game. It was old, Spartan and broken. Despite my anxiety at the time, I took Mario to a room. Closed the door. A horrifying image of Luigi's crotch suddenly appeared, along with a horrible scream. Like a violin being played on a loud piano. Mario knelt down and cried for about 5 minutes, then the screen flickers. I went back to the fort. Mario just slipped out of the frame. The imagery changed from a portrait of deadly lava to an image of Luigi hanging himself. This time the room was different. Now it is a small hall. On both sides of the hall there are touts in white clothes with expressionless faces. Opposite was another painting that completely scared me. This is a picture of my family. This isn't even a picture of Super Mario 64 when it was released. This is a recent photo. I took a pose last weekend. I held the N64 towers. I didn't get a chance to play it again. But when I turned it on, the game was still on. I flipped back and forth but no luck. I tried to disassemble the whole system, but it didn't show up on the screen. I was even able to control Mario. I could never stop. So I kept playing. I went to my family photo and jumped. Of course, there was only one mission. It was called Run, Don't Walk. I chose a Let's Go activity. The stadium begins with a water-filled walkway with floating platforms. Mario lands on one of them, and the camera pans to see what's behind him. A silent black void approached Mario. Everything is not as it seems. It doesn't look like the finished picture. Just a big, lumpy black spot. I started jumping from platform to platform. With no target in sight, I continued on. The darkness was swift but sure. This goes on for hours. I never believed it would end. Mario just entered the ring. Finally, the black blob void thing grabs Mario and shrouds him in darkness. He didn't scream or fight. He eats. Mario defeats the figure and returns to the castle. I lost a third of my life. Now the room is different. Some of the rough edges again in the picture is different. My family and I are the same. But some parts of our body are damaged. The picture is very true to the photo. It is human nature to maintain our bodies. Anyway, I started drawing again. Mario in a small room. There is only one task left. He called I'm here. That's it. I chose a mission and prepared for the worst. Mario ends up in a small dark room. There is no visible exit. The room was empty except for the piano in the corner. I know what that means. I'm stuck with that crazy piano. I approached him and he started chasing me like he always does. There was no way to hurt him, so I had no choice but to let Mario do the damage. When he lost his health, there was no legal death action. Only Mario plays the piano. He's passed out with blood and guts dripping on the floor, the camera zooming in on his body. An animated version of Big Bound played as the screen slowly transitioned from frame to frame of the game over the image of Mario's corpse. It was uncomfortable. I cried softly as I looked at myself in the mirror. I lost another life. They showed me a picture of my family. We are worse off. The image zoomed in, as if I had twisted myself again. I was greeted with a picture of Peach Castle from outside. The castle was moved. Schools are burning. The sky was dark. Bowser's laughter plays on loop in the background, as the kids shout, "You can't save him." This goes on for a long time until Peach's eyes appear, followed by a loud scream that tears through the village without a word. Toadsy's mouth was open, as if crying, and his eyes were black. I quickly returned to the hallway as Mario jumped back out of the drawing. Now all the frogs were gone and the family and I looked disgusting. The larvae entered the holes in our flesh. The intestines come out of our body. My father's eye was hanging from the pit. It was very hard to take, but something told me to keep going. I started painting. There was another life left. This time the quest has no name. It's just a header space. I choose a mission, and Mario lands on a small island in the middle of the ocean with only one sign saying submerge. I do as he says and go into the water. The sea was dark and empty. No fish. I didn't see anything in the water except Mario. I left with water. It took me a while, but Mario didn't give up. I read about 10 minutes of swimming before I decided to go back. When I turned on Mario, he came. I mean, a giant ondaji and a giant eel come out of nowhere and swallow Mario whole. I am a fool. It happened so fast that I didn't know what I was seeing. Playback is not shown on the screen. Everything that happened is over. Show me pictures of me and my family again. Now we are just skeletons. However, it looks very realistic. Can't move the camera, he only focused on the pictures. I closed the game and opened it again. I have selected my file. It will only go to the photos of my family's skeletons. I tried 3 more times before giving up. I really want him to stop, but some force prevented me from going on. I decided to select a single log file. The camera focused on the skeleton again. But this time, they were in a different position. They are like another family.
That's it, huh?
Okay, I have a request. Sometime in the future, can we all perform a let's go activity?
Oh my god. Oh, scary.
So, Luigi,
Editor, distort it. Alright, we're continuing with another one. This is a pretty short one.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, we're doing Herobrine. We're doing Herobrine.
Herobrine, or Claveline. I created a new world in Minecraft. When we were writing and recording in the studio, at first, everything was fine. I saw something moving in the sky. My computer is slow. Once I removed the radiator, I thought, that's it. This is not a cow. Another man with white skin, but nothing. I had never seen this horse before and I saw it twice in different places. He looked at me for a moment and then disappeared into the darkness. I followed him for a while, but he did not follow me. It's funny. I don't know what to think. As I build my world, I discover things that are impossible in Map Maker. Complete with 2x2 sand tunnels and pyramids, trees and fallen leaves. I saw other players in the big cloud, but I didn't meet them. Every time I miss, I try to pass it, but I can't. If anyone sees fake players, I'll save the page and go to the forum. There is no one here. I made my own post so people could discuss it and see if others had similar experiences. The post was deleted 5 minutes later. I tried again and the program was deleted. I got a private message from Herobrine, with only one word, wait. After reading Herobrine's story, I received an email. Platform user management. Email is secure as police can read messages from users on the platform. I have the letter. The postman noticed the hidden player and several other users. His world is full of strange objects and toys that students cannot see. News from the last few months. Anyone familiar with Mystic has seen the name Herobrine and knows that players use it a lot. After searching for more information, we found this game developed by Nick Brothers, and I wrote to him that my brothers are brothers. After a long time, he sent me a message again. And he is no longer with us. Don't stop. When I first met him, I couldn't see the mysterious man, and even if I could, I couldn't see the world changing.
That went hard. That went really hard.
That was like 1% about Herobrine.
My brothers are brothers and brothers, 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 and brothers, and brothers, brothers.
I got the next one up. This one is a classic. We've all at least heard of it.
Oh boy. I can't stand Normal Dream.
Hey everyone, Editor Laura here again. Just thought I'd give a heads up warning for this one. If you aren't familiar with this story, the Russian sleep experiment, it involves descriptions of mutilation and gore, and the translation we have doesn't go light on it. So if that makes you a little bit squeamish, you can probably hop to this timestamp to listen to the next story. It's pretty funny. Alright, thank you. Now enjoy the video. Or don't.
The Russian sleep experiment, or Russian dream. In the late 1940s, Russian researchers used an experimental irritating gas to keep 15 people awake for 15 days. They were placed in a closed room, and their oxygen consumption was closely monitored to ensure they did not die from the highly toxic gas. Before it was discontinued, it was a round camera with just a microphone and a 5-inch framed window in the field of view. The room has books, a bed to sleep on, a mattress, running water, a toilet, and enough dry food for 5 months.
That's a lot.
During World War II, political prisoners considered enemies of the government were prosecuted. The first 5 days were good. The subjects did not complain because they were falsely promised to go through the experiment without sleeping for 30 days. His speech and actions were monitored. He continued to talk about the actions that had been bothering him for the past few days, and after 4 days his speech became increasingly slurred. After 5 days, they begin to complain and show extreme paranoia about the circumstances and events that put them in their situation. They stopped talking and started whispering into the microphone and the two-way mirror. Interestingly, everyone seemed to believe that it was possible to gain the trust of the scientists by betraying their colleagues and other people in custody. At first, scientists thought it was the effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the director called. He ran around the room for 3 hours. He tried to shout, but sometimes it works. Investigators believe the voices were removed. The most striking thing in this situation is how the other prisoners were. He had the idea of such a character. He whispered into the microphone until another prisoner shouted. 2 criminals who did not shout were hitting the books with an axe. They were silent. The shouting stopped. So they whispered into the microphone. For 3 more days, the investigators checked every hour to make sure the microphone was working properly, as they discovered that none of the voices matched the voices of the 5 people inside. Oxygen consumption in the room showed that all 5 people should still be alive. In fact, this is 5 times more oxygen than people consume during intense exercise. On the morning of the 14th, to get answers from the prisoners, the investigators did what they said they could not do. They used the intercoms in their cells, hoping that the frightened prisoners would shout out the answer as to whether they were alive or dead. Dead. We're going to open the room and test the microphones, they announced. Go out the door and lie on the ground or you will be shot. Obedience will set one of you free immediately. To his surprise, he heard the words in a calm voice. We don't want to be separated anymore. A dispute arose between the researchers and the soldiers who funded the study. I cannot answer. Using the intercom again, it was finally decided to open the room at midnight on the 15th. Oil gas was poured into the chamber and fresh air filled it, and immediately the sound of the microphone was heard. As love returned to his heart, 3 distinct voices began pleading for the man's life. Police officers were sent to open the hall and escort the investigators. It was even worse when the soldiers saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects are alive, but none of them call the world alive. Little has been said about food in the last 5 days. Tissue samples from the subject's thighs and breasts were filled into a drainage tube in the middle of the room. Open the drain and collect the water within 4 inches of the floor. The amount of water on their bloody faces could not be identified, and most of the muscles and skin had been removed from the bodies of the 4 survivors. Fractures of the flesh and bone of the hand indicate that the wound is in the hand. It is not a tooth as scientists first thought. Examining the location of the wound reveals that most, if not all, of the wounds are self-inflicted. The stomachs of all 4 subjects were removed from below the thorax. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm are intact, most of the skin and muscle attached to the ribs are cut off, leaving the lungs exposed to the rib cage. All blood vessels and organs were still together, previously removed and placed on the ground, circulating around the human animal bodies, but still alive. You can see how Lauren's digestive system works and digests food. It quickly became clear that they were digesting the meat they had been eating for days. Most of the soldiers in the area were part of Russian special forces, but many refused to return to the building to collect the core documents. They shouted to let him into the room and asked him to give gas so he wouldn't sleep. As you can imagine, the biggest fighter is the shooter. A Russian soldier has died from his injuries. Another suffered serious injuries, his testicles exploded and the snake's teeth ruptured a leg. Weeks after the incident, 5 other soldiers died, including one who committed suicide. One of the 4 survivors of the battle was crushed and died instantly. Medical scientists tried to stabilize him but failed. After being administered 10 times the amount of human morphine, he continued to fight like horns, severing a piece of the doctor's back and arm. When the pulse was checked 2 minutes after the donation, there was more air than blood in the nervous system. He stopped, but screamed for another 3 minutes, trying to hit everything he could, repeating the word more. Show it until it stops. The 3 survivors were isolated and taken to a medical facility, 2 of whom had stiff larynxes and were wheezing. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only operating theater. As he prepared to put the organ back into his body, he found that it could not fight the anesthesia that was preparing him for the operation. He struggled in the car when he got wind. A 4-inch leather strap on one wrist is torn, even by a 200-pound soldier's wrist. They had to give more anesthesia than usual, and the eyelids were closed after the heart stopped. Autopsies of subjects who died on the operating table showed a tripling of blood oxygen levels. The tendons still attached to his neck were painfully torn and 9 bones were broken from his uncontrollable struggle. Most of them come from the strength of the muscles used. Another survivor was the first of the 5 to start crying. My mouth was paralyzed. I could neither ask nor refuse work, and my head shook violently as the cold air approached. When someone told him not to do surgery without surgery, he nodded and underwent a 6-hour procedure to close the intestines and hide the remaining skin. The attending physician repeatedly stated that the patient could be cured. The nervous nurse and the surgical assistant said they looked at the patient's mouth and continued to smile whenever their eyes met. After the operation, the man saw the surgeon and found it difficult to breathe and speak. Realizing that this was important, the surgeon gathered pen and paper to write his message to the patient. It is very easy. Keep cutting. 2 other subjects underwent the same procedure without anesthesia. Even during the work, they need to put drugs. The surgeon realized that this could not be done while the patient was still smiling. When the subjects are sick, they can only follow the research assistant with their eyes. The stunner disabled the system for a shorter time than usual, and they quickly tried to escape their captor. When they started talking, they asked for more gas. The researchers tried to ask them why they hurt themselves, why they broke their necks, and why they wanted to go back to the gas. Answer: I must be awake. The 3 subjects prepared themselves and returned to the room, awaiting a decision on what to do with them. Blackmailed by their military masters, the scientists are expected to kill the living if their project fails to achieve its goals. Bose, a KGB agent, wondered what he could do and wanted to see what would happen if he was fired again. Scientists may disagree, but neither do they. Subjects were hooked up to EEG monitors and restrained for long periods of time in preparation for the testing room. To everyone's surprise, the 3 stopped fighting when they wanted to get gas. Apparently all 3 were having trouble staying awake at this point. One of the topics of conversation is a loud and constant humming noise. The walls press in to stretch your legs on the colored lines, first left, then right, then left again, to focus on something. The person on the left blinked without lifting their head from the pillow. Because they were the first to perform electroencephalograms, many researchers were surprised by their brain waves. Most of the time they are normal, but sometimes the lines are straight. He appears to be permanently brain dead before returning to normal. As they focused on the roll of the brain monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes close and his head hit the pillow. His brain immediately fell into a deep sleep, then slowed down for the last time, and his heart suddenly stopped. The rest of the subject starts yelling for him to stop. His brain waves show exactly the same lines as those who die in their sleep. The manager ordered the room closed, and 2 investigators and 3 investigators were inside. One of the 3 immediately pulled out a gun and shot the leader in the eye, then slowly aimed the gun at the man and shot him in the head. As other investigators and the group left the doctor's room, he pointed the gun at the man lying on the bed. "I am not inferior to this. I couldn't do it without you." He hung on the table and cried. "What are you doing?" he asked her. "I need to know." "Cells. You have forgotten?" He asked about it. "It is we. We are the fools in you, the fools who pray all the time to free you from your deep animal spirit. We are the ones who wake you up every night. We are the ones who remain silent. And I am powerless to you. Go to the night heaven. You cannot go there." The researcher paused. "Then aim at the target's heart and shoot." The EEG was flat because the subject was choking heavily, that is, almost free.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That was,
I think my hardest to piece anything together.
yeah, much like the subjects.
I could not, like, picture the state their bodies are in.
It kept changing.
I didn't want to.
The original story is actually pretty well written, I'd say.
Yeah.
That poor soldier's balls, though. I'm glad the one thing that stuck with us is that the soldier's testicles exploded.
And he got bit by a snake somehow.
What was that there?
Maybe that's
One
what
of them
caused them
turned
to
into-
explode.
One of them turned into a snake.
Let's see, they got food, they got books, an axe, and a snake in this room.
Why did everyone say Brapture, by the way? Why does everyone say Brapture in chat?
I think
Gas.
Rosa said it, and it had to do with all the gas.
The gas. Well, back on the gas. A Russian fart experiment, more like.
Queef experiment.
The Russian fart experiment and your balls explode.
That was a long one. Now, let's go for a shorter one.
Okay.
Okay.
They should sell gas it. Make your balls explode.
Holy shit.
This is Dead Bart.
Dead Bart. or he breathed his last night. Do you know how beautiful Simpson Fox is? Until said before. No one wants to know that missing people are hard to find. Matt Groening's first ad was excellent. I asked myself, I am not strong? Don't get angry if someone tells you. Yes, 7G44 is also known as Death End. It's not cool, but if you ask people, they'll try to call you Matt Groening. I ran out of the room and followed him. I don't follow. He thought about waiting for a new day, but the missing letter changed him. He began to tremble. Is information available on request? He cried as he picked up the book and gave it to me. He said not to speak. This is the URL for the article. I will not explain this in detail because it is easy to understand. When I type the address in my browser, I see a completely black page with no yellow link bar. Click here to download the file. After downloading this file, my computer started behaving strangely. This is the biggest mistake I have ever seen. System restore does not work. You have to start the whole process again. Instead, I downloaded the file from the CD. When I opened it on my computer, I thought it was an episode of The Simpsons. This app works just like any other app. But he was not happy. When I first saw the Halloween dolls, they were similar but not the same. The initial impressions are mixed, but the characters have one thing in common. Homer is angry with Marge, angry with Lisa, angry with Bart, angry and hates his parents. The story is about the Simpson family's trip to Hawaii. After the first message, the plane took off. As expected, Bart appeared. But when the plane was about 50 meters from the ground, Barrett fell out of the plane's front window. When the series started, Matt thought The Simpsons was a life and death show. Using the pattern, although the petticoat pattern is not printed, it is used to create a body image. The first task is to finish the haircut. The second act shows Homer, Marge and Lisa crying at the table. It might be a pain in the neck, but it's more than you think. When he screams and shouts, I think the movie is stupid. The fight continued into the second half. Little Homer, Marge and Lisa are still sitting at the table. There is no sign of magic or evil here. They decide to visit Bart's grave. It was quiet when we arrived at Springfield Cemetery. By the time he was pushed to another house and taken to the cemetery, he was already dead. After the first mission, Bart's body is found in front of the cemetery. The family sheds tears. Bart finally gave up. The camera is on Homer's face. I mean, Homer is funny, but the people I was watching couldn't hear or understand what Homer was saying. Exercise makes you taller. He was a guest on The Simpsons. In 1989, no one could recognize him and only one died. Michael Jackson and George Harrison. You can buy tombstones that predict the death of Simpsons guests. I wonder how many people are left. They all died on the same day.
I can't get over Little Homer.
I mean, Homer is funny, but
I like they went to the cemetery as if they could catch Bart before he's dead or some shit.
I love the declaration of Bart being dead as Bart finally gave up.
Finally.
I do like the idea of like we gotta stop the burial.
Or he'll be dead.
I love the exercise makes you taller in the middle.
We all know this.
Now this one definitely. Okay, content warning, IDK.
Content warning, Disney.
Lots of.
Yeah, content warning, Disney. We'll leave it at that.
Abandoned by Disney, or Disney product. Some of you may have heard that the Disney company is responsible for at least the original living ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island resort in Baker's Bay, Bahamas. It didn't start out as a ghost town. Disney cruise ships actually stop at resorts and drop off passengers on vacation. This is the truth. Look for it. Disney made $30 million on the spot. Yes, $30 million. Then they left him. Disney also blamed shallow water. The ships were too shallow to operate safely, and workers from the Bahamas were too lazy to work on a regular schedule. This is where the real story ends. Not because of the sand, and certainly because of lazy tourists. All of these are valid reasons. No, I don't think these reasons are legitimate. Why can't I buy a case? Pass through Moogli's Palace. On the shores of North Carolina's Emerald Isle, Disney began construction on Moogli's Palace in the late 1990s. The idea was, you guessed it, a resort surrounded by forests with a huge palace in the middle of it. If you are not familiar with the character of Moogli, it would be good to remember the story of the Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you probably know it as a Disney cartoon from years ago. Moogli is a child abandoned in the forest who was originally raised by animals and at the same time is threatened pursued by other animals. Moogli's Palace was a controversial production from the beginning. Disney bought a lot of expensive land for the project, and there was a lot of scandal about some of the purchases. The local authority said it had absolute control over people's homes, and surrendered and sold the properties to Disney. Sometimes the building is condemned suddenly without explanation. It is alleged that the land taken by the government is the land for the construction of the highway. I know what happened. They started calling it the Mickey Mouse Highway. Then came the concept art. A group of Disney-inspired dresses really held a town meeting. They wanted to tell everyone how affordable this plan would be for everyone. When they showed the concept art, it was a huge Indian palace, surrounded by jungle. Men and women serving in logos and tribal clothing. It is not only in the midst of the great palaces, jungles and belts of India, rich lands, but also in a certain xenophobic region of South America. It was a dubious mix at that time in history. One member of the audience tried to climb the stage, but was quickly overpowered by security after he managed to break one of the planks on his lap. Disney took this society and threw it out the window. The houses were leveled and the area cleared and no one could do or say anything about it. Local TV stations and newspapers were against the resort at first, but then the crazy relationship between Disney media properties and local properties came to light and their minds suddenly changed. Anyway, an expensive island in the Bahamas. Disney brought in those millions and failed. The same thing happened to Moogli's Palace. Construction has been completed. Guests actually stayed at the resort. Surrounding communities are filled with the usual worries about traffic and the influx of disoriented and angry tourists. Then everything stopped. Disney closed and no one knew what to think. But I am very happy about it. Losing Disney is strange and funny with a large group of people who don't want them in the first place. To be honest, I haven't thought much of this place since I heard it closed a few years ago. I live about 4 hours away from the Emerald Isle, so I've only heard the sound and never seen it before. Then I read this article from someone who researched the Treasure Island Resort and posted a whole post about all the crazy things they found there. Just things. Left behind. Something that is damaged or broken. It was probably destroyed by a bad former employee who lost his job. Hell, the locals probably helped ruin the place. The people there felt as much anger at Treasure Island as the people here felt at Moogli's Palace. Also, Disney was said to have released their aquarium equipment into the local water when they closed, including the sharks. After all, who doesn't want to push things? Well, what I found was that this blog made me think of Treasure Island. Even though it's been closed for years, I think it would be great to have an urban exploration at Moogli's Palace. Take photos, write about your experiences, and see if you can take something home as a souvenir. I wouldn't say I wasted my time getting there because honestly, when I got Treasure Island it took me a year to get to the Emerald Isle. I did a lot of hotel research that year. Or rather try to. Of course, there is no Disney website or resource about which location. Clean. But it's surprising that no one before me thought to blog about this place or post photos. None of the local TV or newspapers are talking about the place, although that's to be expected because they all go to Disney. They don't want to go out and praise the shame, you know? I recently learned that companies can ask Google to remove links from search results, for example. Basically for no good reason. Looking back, it may be that no one ever talked about the break, but their words could not be repeated. So in the end we didn't find the place. All I had to go on was an old map I got in the post in the 90s. It was a promotional item sent to people who had been to Disney World recently, and apparently since I was there in the late 80s it was last. I really don't want to go out with it. It only appears in my children's books and comics. It took me months of research to remember this, and even then it took me weeks to find the basket my parents put everything in. But I found it. Many are transplants who have moved to the coast in recent years, or are wondering where do I find one? The locals were no help as there were elderly residents who laughed at me and made rude gestures when I could say so. Am I moogli? The car pulled me along in incredibly long growth spurts. Tropical plants spread throughout the region and eventually outcompeted native species and attempted to restore the landscape. I was surprised when I arrived at the main gate of the refuge. A huge solid wooden door, the guards on the right side on the left and right were like carved giant mahogany wood. The door itself was burnt in many places by the gall, and the lower part was eroded by insects. There was a metal sheet hanging over the door, some random pieces and letters written in black ink. Fired by Disney. Apparently, the former residents or workers of the area wanted to organize a small demonstration. The gates were wide open and could be walked through, so driving through was out of the question, so I set off on foot armed with a digital camera and a map showing the layout of neighboring resorts. The inner garden of this place is as big as the gate. A palm tree has been torn from its pile of coconuts. Banana trees also stand out on their heads, full of dirt. There is such a tension between order and chaos, as the well-planted rows of young flowers intertwine with the fragrant black grass. What was left of the outer structure was broken and charred pieces of rotted wood and various unidentified materials. Databases and open bars can be chipped or scraped from previous damage, leaving you with a miscellaneous pile of scrap. The most interesting feature of the grounds is the statue of Baloo, the friendly bear from the Jungle Book, which stands in the form of a garden in front of the main house. She was paralyzed with human pleasure, staring into empty space, shaking, biting and gnashing her teeth as bird droppings covered every part of her wings, and vines fell on her father. When we arrived at the palace, the main building, the outside of the building was covered in graffiti with the original paint still intact. Not only was the door to the great room open, but the front door had been removed and stolen. Above the door, or open, that is where it used to be, is painted from Disney. I wish I could tell you all the amazing things I saw in the palace. A forgotten statue, an abandoned cash register, a veritable secret society of homeless idiots. But no. The interior of the building is very rough and bare. I think people stole the carvings from the walls. It was too big for a burglar. A counter, a table, a huge fake tree. Everything sat in the middle of an empty room that echoed my footsteps like a slow rat from a machine gun. I looked at the floor plan and went where it would be interesting. The kitchen is a commercial dining area with all the equipment and space you could imagine, at no cost. The windows on every floor were broken, every door was torn off its hinges, and every piece of metal was kicked and tied. Everywhere smells old. A large refrigerator, not cold, with rows and rows of empty shelves. There was a hook hanging from the ceiling, perhaps for hanging meat, and after standing in it for a while I saw it shaking. Each hook swung in a random direction, but their movements were so slow and small that it was almost impossible to see them. I thought it was my steps, so I caught one in my fist and slowly released it, stopping it from swinging, but within seconds it started swinging again. The bathroom is like the rest of the place. Like a Treasure Island resort, someone destroyed all the china cabinets with coconuts and other accessories. There was half an inch of rough, smelly water on the floor, so I didn't last long. The weird thing is that the toilets and the sinks in the ladies' room, yes, I've been there, are leaking, or just plain loose. I think they should have turned off the water a long time ago. There are many rooms in the park, but I don't really have time to explore them all. Some of the ones I saw were broken and I didn't expect to find anything there. I think there must be a TV or radio in one of the rooms, because I can actually hear the conversation in the silence. Although it was like a whisper, probably my own breath echoing in the silence, or just another case of the sound of running water playing tricks on my mind. That's what it sounded like. 1. I don't believe it. 2. Short, unknown answer. 1. I don't know that. I do not know that. 2. That's what your father said. 1. Unknown answer, or maybe crying. I know it sounds funny. I'm telling you what I've been through. Why do I wonder what is going on in this room? Or worse, a man hiding in there might stab me. Even at the gate I found nothing good and thought my journey was in vain. Looking at the door, I saw something interesting that I missed in the game. Something appears for all my problems, even if it's just a picture. In the center of the area is a python-like statue, perhaps 80 meters high, with a rising sun on the ground. It is close to sunset, so the light will fall perfectly on the object in the picture. I approached the python and took a photo. Then I stood on my toes and pinched the other one. I approached to take a picture of his face. Slowly and fearlessly, the python raised its head, looked me straight in the eye, turned and left the parking lot through the grass and trees. The total length is 80 feet. Before his tail left the branch, his head disappeared into the forest. Disney has released all of its exotic animals on land. Right there on my floor plan was the reptile house. You should know. I read about the sharks on Treasure Island, and I should have known they did. I was shocked. My mouth must have been open for a long time before I returned to the floor and closed it. He blinked several times and went to the palace from where the snake was. After that I entered the building without risking it. I took a few deep breaths and then patted myself to regain my composure. I looked for a place to sit, even though my legs were now like jelly. Of course, I have nowhere to sit, unless I want to lie on a bed of broken glass and a carpet of dead leaves, or stand on a table with dubious certainty. I saw some stairs in the lobby of the building and decided to sit there until I felt better. Stairs are far enough from the front of the house to be unsanitary. Avoid unexpected dust accumulation. I pulled the metal plate from the wall, and I'm also used to writing the words abandoned by Disney. I took the log upstairs and sat down to clear at least. The stairs go down from the ground floor. Using the camera light as a temporary light, I saw that the stairs ended at a closed metal door. The sign on the door. The real sign. Networks only. Thank you! I kind of like this for two reasons. First, there were once many interesting things in the talisman area. Second, the castle is still there. There was no one there. Not vandals or looters, no one. It was the only place where I could really explore and find something interesting to photograph or steal. I came to the village because I wanted to call it desert. It didn't take much to remove the lock. Yes, this is actually correct. It didn't take much to smash the metal plate against the wall where the lock was attached. Time and decay did most of the work for me, and I was able to bend the sheet metal enough to get the screws out of the wall, something no one thought of at the time. The statue itself was amazing, and a very welcome change from the rest of the building I've seen. For one thing, fluorescent lights are turned on every second or third, but they flicker violently and randomly. Other than that, nothing was stolen or vandalized, although age and exposure have reduced this considerably. There is a notebook and pen on the table. There is a clock. Even a notebook on the wall full of clock cards. There are scattered chairs and a small bathroom with an old TV on the table, empty food and lots of drinks. It's like one of those post-apocalyptic movies where everything goes to shit. As I made my way down the maze-like basement corridor to the mascot-only area, the view became interesting. As I moved forward, desks and tables creaked apart, paper crumpled and almost melted on the wet surface, and a great carpet of mold slowly passed beneath the pristine grayness. Everything was a bit soft. All the wooden items crumbled with the slightest effort, and the clothes hanging on a hook in one compartment easily fell into the damp thread when I tried to open it. One thing that bothered me was that the light was getting weaker and less reliable, and the depth of the hole was getting more and more oppressive. Finally, I came to a door with black and yellow stripes that read Charter Preparation 1. At first the door did not open. I figured this was probably where the laundry was kept and I really wanted a picture of the smelly mess. No matter how hard I tried, no matter what angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. That is, until I got up and left. Then there was a soft sound and the door slowly opened. The room was completely dark. Black as coal. I used the camera flash to find the switch on the wall and by the door, but found nothing. The loud sound of lightning during the call jolted me with excitement. A row of lights suddenly flashed overhead, flickering and going in and out like the other lights I passed by. It took a minute for my eyes to adjust and the light seemed to shine until all the lights went off. But just when I thought I had reached a critical stage, the light dimmed a bit and they became steady. The room was exactly as I had imagined. A variety of Disney costumes hang on the walls, all piled up like cartoon corpses hanging in invisible corners. At the back of the hanger was a pile of bras and ethnic clothes. The image I found amazing and wanted immediately was the Mickey Mouse outfit in the middle of the room. Unlike the other suits, this one lay on its back in the middle of the floor like a murder victim. Skin rots and sheds on clothes, leaving patches. Even more strange is the color of the costume. It's like a real negative of Mickey Mouse. Places that should be white are black, and places that should be black are white. His usual red suit became light blue. The scene was so interesting that I took pictures until the end. I took photos of the clothes hanging on the wall. An upward angle, a downward angle and a side view to show the frozen front row of the cartoon. They are derogatory and some don't have rubber eyes. Then I decided to order the frame. There was only one tattered head lying on the slippery, dirty floor. I grabbed the cover of Donald Duck's suit and carefully removed it so it wouldn't break in my hands. As I looked at the pale gray face of the head, I heard a loud noise that startled me. I looked down at my feet and between my shoes was a human skull. It fell off the pup's head and shattered at my feet. His face was blank and his lower jaw was the only thing left looking at me. As expected, I quickly bowed my head and headed for the door. As I stood at the door, I looked at the skull on the floor. I have to take a picture of it, you know? For some reason this may seem silly, I had to do it, but if you don't mind. I needed proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to fix it. I had no doubt from the beginning that this was Disney's fault, even if it was gross negligence. And then Mickey, the negative image, in the middle of the floor, Mickey started to stand up. The first sitting Mickey Mouse t-shirt, or whatever it was, stood in the middle of the room and started showing me a fake face. And I said, "No. Up." With my hands shaking, my heart pounding, and my legs turning to jelly again, I managed to grab the camera and point it at the other creature, who was now watching me silently. Digital camera screens displayed dead pixels along with the shape of the object. It's the perfect silhouette for Mickey's outfit. As the camera moved between my unsteady hands, dead pixels littered the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved. Then the camera was turned off. Emptiness and silence and devastation. I looked at the Mickey Mouse outfit again. "Hey," he said nervously, but in his best Mickey Mouse voice. "Do you want to see my head fall off?" He began to drag himself, wrapped in a bandage, with his fingernails on the wrist. He could not tolerate the movement of the wound, trying to pull himself away from the evil executioner. And when he put his finger to his throat, a lot of blood came out. Thick, yellow blood. I turned back when I heard the sound of the patients tearing their clothes and eating. All I had to do was run. Above the door of this room I saw the last message hammered into the metal with a bone or a nail. "May Allah have mercy on him." The camera didn't take any photos. I didn't write a blog post about it. After fleeing the place, and fleeing for my sanity, if not my life, I understand why Disney didn't want anyone to know about this place. They don't want people like me to come. They didn't want him to come out.
Jesus Christ.
Okay. I didn't see that one coming. Originally it said abandoned by God.
Yeah. Mercy on him.
My moogli. Number 30.
Moogly's Palace.
Oh my fucking god, this stream idea was so good.
Yeah.
We have one more story.
Okay.
Mr. Widemouth.
Business language.
Mr. Widemouth, or business language. When I was young, my family was like a big river. When I was 8, we moved to Rhode Island and lived there until I went to college in Colorado Springs. My favorite memories are from Rhode Island. But different parts of the house I lived in as a child are still stuck in the ceiling of my mind. Many of these memories are simple and empty, leaving the boy in North Carolina, crossing the river behind the house in Pennsylvania, etc. But the memories are vivid, as if it were yesterday. I often think of these memories as summer fever dreams, but I know. We live in a house near New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It is a big house, especially for 3 families. There are several rooms I haven't seen in 5 months. It was a waste of time, but it was the only house on the market at the time, and less than an hour away from where my husband works. Father. The day after my 5th birthday, only my parents were there. I had a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, so I had a fever for 3 weeks. It was a terrible time in bed. We were packing for Pennsylvania. Most of my things were in boxes and the room was empty. My mother even brought me fingernails and books several times a day, which had been my main focus for weeks. Sadness is always in the corner, rearing its ugly head, waiting to take away my worries. I don't remember when I met my husband. I thought I'd be arrested for a week for talking in the park. My first reaction to this little thing was to wonder if it had a name. Answer, because Weymouth has a big mouth. Learn about it. Eyes, ears are bigger than the body, but the face is bigger. You look like a Furby, he said, opening my book. People quit their jobs. He opened his mouth and looked at me. History. What's a Furby? He asked. Heck no. It's funny. I understand. It's what again? You don't have to do this. They are not good friends. Every mother you meet feels a sense of loss. I sleep under your bed, he later explained. Because I'm afraid your parents won't meet me. We didn't do much at first. Mr. Widemouth found my book and enjoyed the stories and pictures. On the 3rd or 4th morning after seeing him, I smiled and said hello. He said, I have a new toy. Because my mother couldn't watch us play, we waited for her to come to see us. This is a hidden game. Later, Emma shared books and drinks as usual. He held my hand under the bed. Go to the room at the end of this hallway, he said. At first I resisted because my parents wouldn't let me get out of bed without permission, but until I agreed, Miss Isabel remained firm. No furniture or wallpaper in the house is taken into account. The only difference is the doors and windows. Widemouth entered the room, broke the window and threw him out. He asked to come down and look again. We are on the 2nd floor of a building on top of a hill, and due to the slope of the corner there is a height difference of more than 2 floors. I want to play here, said Widemouth. I'm going to pretend there's a big soft trampoline under this window and I'm going to jump. If it looks high, I will fly like a feather. I hope you will try it. I was a little suspicious, and I looked around to see if it was because of a fever that I had when I was about 5 years old. That's a long question, I said. But that's part of the fun. It's not fun if you fall a little bit. If you fall, you're on a real trampoline. I played with this idea and imagined that I would fall from the sky and then turn to the window and see something that the human eye could not see. But the truth surprised me. Maybe another time, I said. I don't single quote know if I have enough imagination, it might hurt me. Mr. Widemouth will come, but for a moment. Anger turns to sadness. He says as you say. On all the hot days there was salt under the bed. The next morning, Widemouth arrived with a small box. I want to teach you how to shave, he said. You must do this before you start the course. I found it in a box. It is full of beauty. My parents killed me. I cry looking at you. Widemouth put the knife in the drawer. I failed and went to jail for a year so my parents wouldn't touch me. A man with wide lips and wide eyes. That's funny. Try it. I paid for the box. No way. I have a problem. I don't want to throw the knife in the air. A loud moan came from his mouth. He took the knife case and put it under my bed and it stayed there all day. I began to wonder how many times he had died. He fell asleep. Almost, sir. He wakes me up at night. There's a rocket under the window, a big one that you can't see in the dark. I had trouble sleeping, but Sir Widemouth continued. Sometimes he asked me to wake up with him until morning. Games are no longer fun. One morning my mother came and saved me. He thought he could use some fresh air, especially after spending so much time in my room. Courageously, I put on my sneakers and stepped out onto the balcony, enjoying the sunshine on my face. Ben, wait for the Widemouth. You should see one, he said. No, I swear, he said, sounding indifferent. I followed him to the beginning of the deer trail in the forest behind the house. He said, this is the most important way. I have many friends from your generation. When they are ready, I will take them to a special place. You're not ready yet, but one day I'll take you there. When I came home, I wondered what was on the other side. 2 weeks after meeting everyone at Widemouth, our last shipment was loaded onto the transporter. I sat next to my father in a taxi on a long trip to Pennsylvania. I wanted to talk to my husband about it, so I decided to keep my information private. My father and I got into the car at 4 o'clock. He was expected to arrive in Pennsylvania that evening with unlimited coffee and a 6-pack of wine. If you want to walk for a day or two, you can get some exercise. Fast enough?
You'll get too tall, though.
Teased me. He took it and put it back to the window, hoping to sleep before the sun came up. My father put his hand on my shoulder. This is the last step, I promise. I know it can be difficult for you because you are sick. When your father is transferred, we will be with friends. When I got out of the street, I opened my eyes. And Mr. Fotobella Vusta from my bedroom window. He was waiting for the truck to leave. He held a steak knife in his hand and winced in pain. I am not retired. A few years later I moved to a new vineyard. A few years after the family moved in, the house burned down. Because of that, our house was empty and empty. Curiosity pushed me to follow the deer tracks that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me thought he was running behind a tree. But I think Mr. Widemouth is stuck in an empty house. The service concluded at Berry Bridge Cemetery. He found that most of the graves were of children.
Okay. Mr. Widemouth.
Mr. Widemouth. Mr.
Weymouth.
Weymouth.
Widemouth.
Broadmouth.
Sir Broadmouth.
Yo, Mr. Widemouth, we need 38 miles kilometer of Mephi.
Miles per kilometer.
You look like a Furby. What's a Furby? It's funny. Okay, I understand.
What the hell even happened?
I
don't
couldn't
know.
tell.